Hello, my name is Mark Hugo Lopez, and I'm the Director of Global Migration and Demography Research at the Pew Research Center. I want to talk to you today about some of the work the center's been doing around the U.S. Latino population, but also the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on Latinos, both in terms of their experience with the virus, but also the impact on their economic lives. But first, before I talk about that, I want to give you a sense of who the Pew Research Center is. We're based in Washington, D.C., and we're a nonpartisan, non-advocacy organization. Our purpose is to provide information to the public, and we take no positions on policy. But with that said, let me share with you some findings that we've collected over the last few years related to the nation's Latino population, about population growth. As you know, the nation's Latino population is growing rapidly and continues to do so. It's reached over 61 million people, or nearly 61 million people, in 2019, according to the US Census Bureau. And what's also striking about this is that when you take a look at Latino population growth over the last decade, about half of the nation's population growth alone has come from Hispanic population growth. This is continuing a story that's been in place for at least 2 decades now, where Latinos have been a principal driver of US population growth nationally. And that's going to continue to be the case into the future. But also, when you take a look at where Latino population is growing, you can see that the Latino population is growing fastest actually in the upper Northwest, in places like North Dakota and South Dakota. But the South as a region continues to be the principal place, or the fastest growing place, I should say, for Hispanic population growth, even though we have some fast growth happening in Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Meanwhile, states like California and Texas, while still growing, aren't necessarily the fastest growing states among the nation's 50 states in the District of Columbia for Hispanic population growth. We've also been tracking the ways in which the population likes to refer to itself. So how do Latinos describe their identity? And if you've been following this, you probably have noticed that more and more people, more and more organizations, celebrities, media, companies are using the term Latinx to describe the population of people who self-describe themselves as Hispanic or Latino. But what does the population of people itself say about these terms? Well, first, are people even aware of it? When we ask Latino adults, have you heard of the term Latinx? We find, for example, that about 3/4 say that they have not heard of the term before. And when we ask whether or not people actually use the term to describe their identity, in total, just 3% of Latino adults in the United States today tell us that they use the term Latinx to describe their own identity. So interestingly, a term that seems to be becoming more popular and more widespread in use isn't quite known by the public it's meant to describe. In addition, when you put the term Latinx up against terms like Hispanic or Latino or some other term, and people can choose some other term, you'll find that it is Hispanic that by far is the term preferred by the nation's population of people who trace their roots to Latin America and Spain. 61% of all adults tell us that that's the term that they would prefer to use to describe the Hispanic or Latino population in the United States. You'll notice that Latino is second to that with 29%, and Latinx is at only 4% among Latino adults. I just wanted to share some of these findings to put in perspective and give us some context for the findings I'm going to share with you now related to COVID-19 impact on Latinos and also the economic impact of COVID-19 on the Latino population in the United States. One of the things we've been tracking at the center is doing surveys asking the U.S. public about their experiences with COVID-19. And first, it's important to note that Latinos, just like Black Americans, are more likely than other groups of U.S. adults to say that they know somebody who's been hospitalized due to COVID-19 or somebody who has passed away because of COVID-19. About half of Latino adults say that in our survey, in our most recent survey that we did, where we asked this back in August. These numbers are undoubtedly higher now, given the surge of cases and surge of deaths that are occurring nationwide due to COVID-19. We've also found that when we talk to Latinos about whether or not they've taken a test for COVID-19 and tested positive, or are pretty sure that they themselves have had COVID-19, you'll find that, for example, 22% of Latino adults tell us that they're either pretty sure or had a positive test for COVID-19 over the course of the pandemic. That's higher than it is for generally for U.S. adults. Only 14% of U.S. adults say the same. But it's also notable that 7% of Latino adults tell us in our surveys that they've tested positive for COVID-19. Again, a higher share than any other large racial or ethnic group of Americans when you look at the data that we collected back in August. What's also interesting, though, is despite the impact directly of COVID-19 on the lives of Latinos and people that they know who may have actually come down with COVID-19, or they themselves actually testing positive for the test or being pretty sure that they have COVID-19, the share of Latinos who say that they would get the vaccine when a vaccine becomes available has actually declined over the course of the last few months. Between May and September of this year, the share of Latino adults who say that they would get the COVID-19 vaccine when it became available has fallen from 74% to 56%. Now, this isn't unique. This is something that's happening across the U.S. public, and the U.S. public has generally become somewhat more, has had some doubts about whether or not they themselves will get the vaccine, despite some of the recent news that we've seen around vaccine advancements. But it's notable that Latinos, just like other groups of Americans, have declined in the share who say that they would get the coronavirus vaccine once it became available. The impact of COVID-19 is not only just on health and on the personal lives of Hispanics, but it's also something that has impacted the economic lives of Latinos as well. And the Hispanic unemployment rate is spiked in April of this year. It reached over 18.5%, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. This high unemployment rate was the highest among the largest racial and ethnic groups, by the way. And it's the highest we've seen the Hispanic unemployment rate over the course of the last 2 decades, at least going back to just before the Great Recession. Now, what's also interesting here is that we were experiencing record lows in Hispanic unemployment rates just prior to the Great Recession. So the unemployment picture for Latinos was looking really positive just prior to the COVID-19 outbreak and the pandemic coming to the United States. Since this peak of 18.5%, the Latino unemployment rate has come down. It is now no longer the highest among the largest racial and ethnic groups. We will be getting some new data in December that will tell us about the unemployment rate of Latinos in November. But still, it remains high and remains above where we were just prior to the COVID-19 outbreak. This unemployment rate story is really striking when you look at it by gender, however. 1 in 5 Hispanic women were unemployed in April. And the unemployment rate for Hispanic women continues to outpace Hispanic men and really hasn't come down. Now, this isn't unique just to Hispanic women. It's actually happening with women generally, and it's actually got a 2-part story to it. It's not only about unemployment, but also people not being in the labor force because many women might stay home to take care of childcare needs as children are at home because schools are closed or daycares are closed. But the other part of the story is immigration. When you take a look at foreign-born Hispanics and U.S.-born Hispanics, both experienced a spike in unemployment, but foreign-born Hispanics or immigrant Hispanic workers have actually been able to return to work at faster rates than their U.S.-born counterparts, and so you see a growing number of Hispanic immigrants back in the workforce, and therefore their unemployment rate falling. All of this is interesting because it has household impacts. When we talk to Latinos and other Americans about whether or not somebody in their household has been laid off or lost a job or had to take a pay cut because of COVID-19, you'll find that among Hispanic households, 41% say, yeah, somebody in their household has been laid off or lost a job. 51% or half will say that they had to take a pay cut because of COVID-19. And when you take that together, and whether or not one of these two things or both have happened to an individual, you'll find that 61% of Latinos tell us that somebody in their household either lost a job or had to take a pay cut. By far the largest share of any group of racial or ethnic group in the United States, and again, pointing to the large impact and the wide impact of the COVID-19 economic downturn on Hispanic households. We've also asked Hispanics about many other things related to their financial lives. And this slide shows you a number of things that we found around Latinos being worried about their finances. 57%, for example, worry about paying their bills. 51% are concerned about the amount of debt they have. 50% are worried about healthcare costs. About half say that they've had to take a pay cut or reduce their hours or demand for work, a finding I just showed to you earlier. But notably, it is Hispanic women more than Hispanic men who are having to take pay cuts or reduced hours as a result of the coronavirus outbreak. Also, many are worried about being able to save for retirement, and 45% worry that they're going to lose their job. And this is really true, particularly of Hispanic women. 54% of them tell us that they're worried about losing their job because of the coronavirus outbreak. I want to end by talking a little bit about some of the national Latinos and their views on national economic conditions, because the economy was actually the top issue that Latino voters pointed to when we asked them in October, what is the most important issue for your vote? It was closely followed, by the way, by COVID-19, healthcare, and racial and ethnic inequality. But I want to focus on where Latinos see the national economy going, just to set the stage. We were following assessments of the national economy among the U.S. public and among Latinos overall, and generally the share of Latinos who rated the national economic conditions as excellent or good has declined, from about half who said things were excellent or good in January to only 18% in June. But we also see that Latinos have grown more optimistic about the next year. So a growing share say that they expect economic conditions to improve. By June of this year, about half said that they expected economic conditions to improve. Now, we are continuing to pursue research in this area, so stay tuned for more work from the center on the attitudes of Latinos around economic conditions, but we should have some new information on that out sometime before the end of the year. Finally, is the worst yet to come when it comes to the coronavirus outbreak? And how do Latinos feel about whether or not the worst is behind us? You can see here that attitudes for the U.S. public and for U.S. Hispanics have improved when it comes to whether or not the worst is still to come. Even so, 70% of Latino adults tell us that they think the worst is still to come for the country with regards to the coronavirus outbreak. That's down from 75% in April. But Latinos haven't quite shifted as sharply as the U.S. public has overall. In June, we found 59%, for example, of U.S. adults felt that the worst was still to come, but 40% felt that the worst was behind us. Now, this question, of course, is tied to the time of the summer. So it reflects what was happening in the summer of 2020. As the coronavirus surges again across the country, attitudes here on this question may have changed again. So keep that in mind, that this is a constantly changing environment when it comes to attitudes about the direction of the country and whether or not the worst is still to come around the coronavirus and COVID-19 outbreak. I'm going to stop there. You can find more of our work at pewresearch.org, or you can follow us on social media. And if you'd like to be in touch, you can reach me here at my contact information, or reach out to our communications manager, Tanya Arditi, who could be reached here as well. Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to our conversation.
Hi, this is Richard Edelman. Our firm has been following trust for the last 20 years in business, government, NGOs, and media. And in the last 4 years for Hispanics, African Americans, Asian Americans, and the white community. The Hispanic community has the most volatile record in trust. It came in our first year of tracking in 2017, actually quite high in trust. We had surveyed just before the election. Then in 2018 data, which was reflecting the first year of the new administration, trust collapsed. The Hispanic trust levels were actually the lowest among all of the four ethnic groups. Last year, there was a slight rise, and the year after, but this year, there's a stunning jump in trust in the Hispanic community, so that for the first time, we see that the Hispanic community is the most trusting of any of the ethnic groups in the United States. So here are the specifics. In fact, business is the most trusted institution among Hispanics at 57%, tied with NGOs. Media is 52%, and government is at 50%. But the biggest change this year was actually in government. A 10-point rise in government, 6 points in business, 6 points in NGOs, 3 in media. The most trusted institution overall, however, is my employer, which means that actually trust is local. Trust comes from my company. And so there's big responsibility for the CEO or other within the company to tell the Hispanic community what is going on. We also find a substantial difference between small business and large business for Hispanics. It's a 20-point delta. So for large business, it's about 50% trust. For small business, it's 70% trust. It's important to understand that the jump in government is just data from the week after the election. We have just come out of the field this week. So whatever the perceptions within the community about this most recent election, the overall rise in the community and trust in government is very significant. I want to talk further about which sources are trusted by Hispanics. It turns out that advocacy groups and activist groups are more trusted than the media. That in fact, again, since trust is local, also it's friends and family, fellow employees, and also a person like me. Also, experts matter, particularly on the matter of COVID, doctors, and particularly my doctor, and people from the science community. The Hispanic community is also noteworthy in that it's absolutely clear that my necessity is for business to do the right thing. Be clear that Hispanics say, if a company does speak up for me, there's a 4 times more likely that I'm going to buy that brand. And in terms of working for the company, it's a 5 times more likely that I'll work for the company, be loyal to the company, and advocate for the company. So any idea that companies should keep their heads down and not, really speak up is false. In fact, it's demonstrated in our data that those companies that stand with the Hispanic community will be rewarded with sales, with loyal employees. So there you have it. It's a quick summary of a major change in trust ecosystem. Hispanic community now the most trusted among white, Black, Asian, and Hispanic communities. What people can do in business is to recognize this as an opportunity, a moment in time when there is a real sense of positivity, that there's a commitment to the proposition that I will reward you with my purchases and with my loyalty as an employee if you stand with me. This is the year for the Hispanic community to rise, to absolutely take advantage of this moment. Don't be passive. Don't sit back. Lean forward. And what companies can do is recognize that they have to make sure that they have more Hispanic employees, that they should sign the Hispanic promise, that they should absolutely be focused on retaining, training, and promoting the Hispanics. Also, they should develop products specifically for the Hispanic community, as they have for African American. They should raise the number of Hispanics within advertising and make sure that Hispanics are seen as they are in the real world. This is a significant change in the trust levels of Hispanics. We don't see this 10 points jumps in a year. It's very unusual. It's also a sense, though, of a moment in time when Hispanics will have greater expectations of business in particular. In conclusion, this is a community with opinion in flux. 1 year down, 1 year up. The necessity for business and for government is to calm the waters, to make sure that Hispanics feel seen, feel rewarded, feel recognized. And as this has been the year for African Americans in 2020, 2021 can and should be the year for Hispanics. This is the moment to make sure that companies put brands out that are specific to the Hispanic community, have advertising that shows the true Hispanic stars, that government also makes sure that we have training programs and that we get relief for the Hispanic-owned small businesses. So lean in, business. This is your time.
Hi, everybody. I am so excited to be here. I first of all want to thank Claudia and Michelle and all the team of the people that put together this conference. It is needed. I love the 2 objectives. One is to change the narrative. The other one is to gather us, to try to change it together. I think that's so important. We need to work together. I think there's consensus that there's no way out of that one. And that's exciting. We can do so much when we work in the same boat. My name is Ana Valdez, and I'm the Executive President of the Latino Donor Collaborative. I am here to tell you a little bit about our numbers, a little bit about the contributions of Latinos, why we do these numbers, and then how can we use it to change the narrative. So with that, I am going to share my screen. You will be able to see me in the upper corner, but we'll be focused basically on my presentation, and I think you'll like it. Et voila. Okay. So again, we're going to talk about the economic impact of Latinos in America. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are so that you understand where our data comes from and why do we do it. We're a think tank. We put together information, and our aim is to create a real fact-based narrative of who Latinos are. And why did we decide to go with fact-based narrative? Because it's the only way to create an accurate perception, and specifically of the economic impact, because it's what really matters to all Americans. There is a very important part of the moral factor of why Latinos should have a positive narrative, but there is a very powerful, probably wider spread premise of economic impact that is very underused and that should be well known. So 10 years ago, when the Latino Donor Collaborative was found, the leaders that founded decided that that was going to be the aim, to show the accurate perception of how Latinos are impacting the economy and how indispensable they are for it. We distribute this information for free. You can go to our website. We actually invite all of our Latino colleagues and everybody to go to our website, latinodonorcollaborative.org, and download it. But most importantly, we actually strategically share it with national resource allocators, business decision makers, and opinion influencers. Why? Because they use it to empower their bottom line, and the way to use it is including Latinos. So that helps to open the doors for our community. Overall, we have created 27 original reports, and we don't do the research in-house. We partner, and we partner with the top research experts. So here are some names. You can see that on the academic side, we partner with UCLA, Stanford, Cal Lutheran, Columbia University, and we also partner with groups like Boston Consulting Group, NERA, Nielsen, Morgan Stanley, to create this data that we are talking about and that I'm going to share with you. You probably have seen our data also covered by media on the economic realm of news stories, and we're always happy to see that. We also write op-eds, and we have campaigns, and you probably have seen some of them sharing our information. And last but not least, one of the most exciting parts of actually my job is to sit with one-on-one sessions with corporate and media leaders, CEOs, CMOs, COOs, presidents, and show them this information. And together, finding ways to, how do I say this in a politically correct way? Finding ways to show them their blind spot with the community and empower them to create strategies to tackle it, and more importantly, to grow with it. So our overall theme is the new mainstream economy. Why? Because we talk about the economy of the 20th century, the 1980 America that was 88% white and that was managed in certain way. But then 40 years later, 20 years into the 21st century, we actually cannot act except with the new mainstream economy in mind. Why? Because that's the only America that exists today, a country where 41% is diverse and where this diversity is actually driving the economy. And so that's what we call most of the presentations that we have, which is the new mainstream economy in America. First, Why are we so important for this country? Well, number one, we have the highest fertility. The numbers are the numbers, and our growth is tremendous. It was tremendous via immigration all the way till 2008, but then starting 2008, immigration became much less relevant for Latinos, and our growth now comes from our national fertility rate. As you can see in this graphic, Latinos have the highest one, and we are not only replacing ourselves, but we're actually growing our community. If you see in this chart, Blacks, whites, and Asians actually have a much lower rate, and that makes us a real gift for this country because workforce is growth. Amongst population, I'm going to share with you some other premises and numbers that come from our research, and that enlightens really the way Latinos are contributing. And again, I don't want to reinstate the importance of our contributions, but the way we're driving the growth of this economy. First, let's go to the Latino GDP. Our report in 2020 delivered a number of $2.3 trillion that Latinos are contributing to the GDP in America. And let me give you two premises so that you understand the proportion of this 2.3 trillion. If Latinos were an economy by itself, if we were an independent country with $2.3 trillion, we would be the 8th largest country in the world. And not only that, but we are growing so fast that our GDP is the single fastest growing. If we were a fully developed economy, it would be the single fastest growing. Number two, consumption, because GDP means productivity, but consumption is also tremendous for Latinos. So US Latino real consumption grew 72% faster than the non-Latino consumption. What does this mean? This means upward mobility. This means that we not only are producing, but we're advancing, we're growing as community, as individuals. We consume, we buy houses. There's a study that says that 56% of all the new homes from our partners at NAREP, 66% of all the new homes in America are being bought by Latinos. If that's not upward mobility, I don't know what it is, but it is. We are not only producing, we're consuming and we're growing. I mentioned before, and here in number 3, I mentioned before on my chart, the Latino population is growing 6 times faster than the non-Latino population. That means that 1 million US Latinos will turn 18 this year, and every year for the next 2 decades. And let me tell you what that means. That means that our community hasn't even peaked. Our average age is 28 years old. The average age of a non-Latino in America is 42. Our kids have not even entered the workforce, and we're already driving the economy. Imagine how that will look in the next years. We also are responsible for 82% of the growth in the US workforce, and we are 5 percentage points higher than non-Latinos in participation rate. We have a study that we've been doing actually with NERA that talks about how Latinos are productive. How? Why? Yes, it's true. We know the neighbor, the friend, the family member that has 3 jobs. We know the kids, our kids that have, 2 jobs while going to college. But why are we so productive? We are not only working tremendously, our work ethic is very powerful, but we're also working more. There's a study that is coming out from the Latino Donor Collaborative from us about coronavirus. And we're gonna deliver numbers that show that even during the crisis of the pandemic, Latinos are losing jobs and are getting jobs again faster than anybody else. If we don't get the same job because the job disappeared, we find new ones. If we don't get new ones, we found a new business and we sell something. But we find a way to continue being productive, and that's a gift of the Latino community too. And last but not least, we build businesses. 86% of all the new net growth in businesses is Latino. We're not only building wealth for ourselves by founding businesses, but we also are giving jobs not only to Latinos but also to non-Latinos, as the latest report from SLAY says, Stanford. But also we are growing the businesses that already exist. We actually are growing these businesses. It's not all moms and pops stores in the corner. We are in tech, we are in medicine, we are in entertainment, and we're growing those businesses. I'm going to give you 3 examples in more depth about how we are indispensable for this economy. And I'm only giving you 3 examples in the next 3 charts because I could give you 100, but we don't have the time. But these 3 are so relevant, especially now during the pandemic. Where would America's food supply be without the Latino factor? I chose this example for you because I remember that Bill Gates said at the beginning of the pandemic something like, if you think this health crisis is dramatic, just imagine a food supply crisis. And I right away thought about our Latino community because, as you can see here, almost 40% of all food processing workers are Latinos, 34% of all cooks, 29% of all bakers, 73% of all farm workers. Imagine that food crisis that Bill Gates is talking about that could happen, just by not having Latinos, just by not having Latinos continuously growing into these jobs. This is a $985 billion industry, agriculture is, and we are 73% of all farm workers. Another great example is the construction industry. What would happen if we weren't there? Because 70% of all drywall installers are Latinos, 56% of all roofers, and 37% of all construction workers. Imagine new homes being built without Latinos. They would be far fewer. They would be much more expensive. The way we are contributing to the economy is not only with our work, but also with the possibility of the amount of work that we produce. What would happen finally to the apparel industry? Well, look at these numbers. 47% of all cut and sew apparel manufacturing employees are Latinos. 44% of all sewing machine operators, 29% of all the textile and leather manufacturing. This again is an industry of $9.6 billion. Imagine what we would lose to other countries in Latin America, other countries in Asia, because we wouldn't have enough workforce. Again, I think I already said it. Entrepreneurs are not only building new businesses, but they are delivering money and they are delivering new jobs for Latinos and for non-Latinos. And the bottom line is that if we grow 80% of the American workforce, and if workforce is the engine for growth, as all economists know, without Latinos, the economy wouldn't grow. So back to the beginning. These numbers are impressive, they are real, and they show the indispensability of our community. I do these presentations because I really want every one of us to use this data as our magic weapon to live in this space of Latino greatness. Why do I say this? Because when we finish this presentation, when we finish this fabulous conference, we'll go back to the world, we'll go back to live in the space of a world that thinks that Latinos are ... Unfortunately, mostly not positive things. This data will help us to keep living in the space that we're living right now, in this space where Latinos are contributing to the growth in amazing ways, and to spread the word and to build that outside world also with these numbers, to spread the word to the value of who we are, to change the narrative of our neighbors, our kids, our bosses, our clients. This data is really your tool and your magic weapon. Now, this was the great part, right? And again, please go to our website. You can download all this information in detail. Now, how does this affect the narrative? We already talked about how we distribute our information with decision makers, with the most important newspapers and media news outlets, and that's important. But in the end, the narrative of who we are is being created by the media, by the mass media. So how do we change that narrative? The way it was created, by changing the images in mass media. This is a mission, this is a fight that has been taken by various organizations, some of them represented here, which I'm so excited about, and some of them like Joaquin Castro, Congressman Joaquin Castro, that is actually, all alone taking, media leaders in Hollywood, traveling to LA from Washington to demand action, to demand a change. And what you're going to see in the next charts is what the Latino Donor Collaborative is doing to contribute to it. I want to give you some numbers so that you understand what we're doing and you understand a little bit of the situation of Latinos in media. First of all, according to Nielsen, Latinos account for more than 29% of the audiences in the United States. That comes with the spending that those audiences are doing. So first, obviously, sign up to digital platforms, sign up to cable, distributors, buying the products that the shows are advertising, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that 29% of the audience is paying their way into being that percent of the audience. So we Latinos are spending money by being the audience. But guess what? On the other side of that line that you see in my chart is the percentage of our representation in media. So we're actually consuming the media, but we're not representing. Like my husband used to say, my green money is good enough for you to take, but my brown face is not good enough for you to put me on the photo or on the film or on the TV show. Why? This balance is not good for anybody. This unbalance, lack of balance is not good for anybody. We go back to the moral premise. It's not good for our kids. It's not good for us. It's not good for our community. And it's not good for America to not have representation in media. But also, it's terrible for the business of media. Because imagine a consumer product company whose products are being bought 30% by Latinos and not having a Latino strategy. Imagine a Pepsi without a Latino advertisement, or Procter & Gamble, or General Mills. That would be almost suicidal, right? Well, media is doing that. Media has such a blind spot that they're doing that. Only 1.4% of the leads in shows and films are Latinos. Only 2.1 of all writers are Latinos, and only 1.1 of all directors are Latinos. And why do actors, writers, and directors are important for us? Because actors, writers, and directors are the ones that are creating the narrative. They're the ones that hire the actors. They're the ones that create the story. They're the ones that direct the story. They're the ones that create the heroes. They are the ones that decide who gets the girl. These people are deciding, and we don't have our community represented within this industry. Our representation has been scarce and negative. We've heard this before, right? I mean, there's a study about UCLA that talks about the lack of diversity, and Columbia University has talked about it. And USC has another diversity report in media that is very focused on women. And then Pew Research has mentioned it here and there, and other fabulous organizations have, right? But none of them actually have numbers and have raised their voice about specifically the lack of Latino representation. And Latinos, according to Nielsen, are the ones the least represented. So the LDC created a report that is fully focused in Latinos, that is really deep in the analysis, and that is shared with you and with any and all decision makers in media to benchmark our participation and our representation. This report is called the Latinos in Media LDC Report. And we've been reporting on actresses and actors, showrunners, directors, and writers since 2018. We report this by season. And the greatest part, I think, of this report is that not only we're fully focused on Latinos, but our report is a census. It's not a sample. All these other reports that I mentioned are samples. They grab and decide on certain amount of shows and they focused on them. Ours is a census. We review every single show in traditional TV and in platforms that is aired in a year, every single one of them. And in the case of films, we review every film in digital platforms and the top 100 box office films every year. And we report not only on what I already said, which is the talent behind and in front of the camera, but also we report by studio, by network, by cable channel, and by streaming platform. Why is this important? Because we go to CEOs and we tell them, your studio is doing this and this and this and this in the Latino space. Your competition is doing this and this and this and this in the Latino space. The market has grown with this and this and this activities in the Latino space. This is your blind spot and this is your opportunity. So we're not in the business yet, parentheses, of shaming media. We're in the business of helping them to attack and to combat their terrible blind spot with our community. And this report is also divided by genre. So drama has a specific behavior, comedy has a different behavior, reality, kids, and animation. And we report by studio and by genre. How do we go to the CEOs of media and talk to them? We make them aware of the way their clients, the advertisers, are dealing with the Latino community. Most advertisers have a Latino and a powerful Latino strategy. Why? Because their products the growth of their products is being driven by the Latino market. If you see this chart, the red bars is the Latino consumption growth. The blue one is the overall US consumption growth. Every step of the way since 1990, Latinos have grown faster in every category of consumption products than anybody else. Specifically, we have this by industry. I am sharing here just one example, which is the beauty industry, because we have it by product. So hand and body lotion, bar and liquid soap. Latinos have outgrown every other non-Latino community. The red bars are the ones that grow. Those are the Latino community. And we tell them, not only your clients, which are the advertisers, know what you're missing, but also you should think about your future, because today, 25% of our Latino Gen X's are 25% of our American Gen X's are Latinos. I'm sorry, that's Gen Z. It's not Gen X, it's Gen Z's. 25% of all Latino Gen Z's are Latinos. Ay, ay, ay. 25, yeah, you know what I mean. 25% of all Americans are Gen Zs. Imagine your future. If you're not investing in them, if you're not creating brand recognition, if you're not catering to them, you're going to lose them, because today they're going to digital. They're going to social media because you're not delivering for them. So they're going to other places where they can see themselves reflected. And we present the real hardcore negative data that they don't like to see, but that they want to see, because it confronts them with their reality. Out of a total 1,022 shows aired in 2019, only 13 had a Latino lead. Only 48 had Latino co-leads. 11 and 24 were the showrunners and the directors. And look at the percentages. Other than the directors, none of them have more than 1.5%. Remember the chart where I told you that 30% of the audience is Latino. Look at these percentages. 1.4, 1.1. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's an imbalance that talks about bad business decisions. Their excuses: oh, Latino stories don't sell. The Latino talent looks too Latino or doesn't look Latino enough. Audiences are not interested in seeing Latino talent or Latino stories. No way. This is what we present them, because we come to these meetings prepared. This is just an example, but we show them how in digital, which is the most democratic media ever, because there is no control, right? It's all about the content creator, which is the individual, and the audience, which is the person just liking or buying or following, the content. So number one Instagram account, Selena Gomez. Top highest WAG earner in social media, Shakira. Number one YouTube video in 2019, Daddy Yankee. Stories like Coco, Dora the Explorer, Fast and Furious, movies from J-Lo, the Super Bowl with them in, halftime, all are incredible successes. So this lie about Latino content doesn't sell, it's the biggest, most unfounded, lack of fact-based premise that exists. And for the people that tell us that there is not enough talent, we actually have created a database of talent called The Source. Out of all this census that we've done of shows in the last 2 or 3 years, we actually have compiled a list of more than 2,200 Latino working actors and actresses, writers and directors that are ready to go. They're not being used. They have been hired. They are vetted by studios and networks, because they have been hired in the last 3 years. They were in one of the shows that we're reporting, but they have not been rehired. And they are ready to go. They can be groomed, they can be grown, and they are perfect for their pipelines. And lots of them are actually already ready for prime time. They are ready to be leads. They are ready to be writers of big shows. They are ready to be directors of movies of big box office budgets. So for the people that say there is no talent, or Latino stories and talent don't sell, we have the solution. We have the numbers. Remember, we're all about fact-based numbers. So to summarize, we told you how great the Latino community is. We're driving the growth, period. There's no way out of that. But we also told you of the unbalanced media that is actually creating negative perception and is creating negative narrative. We're giving you and we're providing anybody that wants to be an ambassador for this fight and for this mission 3 things. One is a benchmark, which is the Latino Media Report that talks about how the evolution of Latino representation is happening. 2 is a database. So there are more names than you can ever wish for in that database of Latino talent. And 3rd is our meetings one-on-one with decision makers, the conveying of the business premise of the blind spot that needs to be fixed, both for their sake and for our sake. This is the business case that we constantly do, although the moral imperative of Latinos in media is always in our minds. So if you, to close this presentation, I'm gonna give you some call for action. If you are a studio, a network, or a streamer, 1, use our report, share it. Share it with your colleagues, share it with your company, up and down. Why? Because it's a benchmark. It'll give you a metric, and it'll give you also credibility when you change that metric. Number 2, use our database. You can enrich your casting and your hiring so easily, people that are ready to go. Number 3, hire Latino executives. If you think these numbers are useful, you can have an in-house person telling you these numbers constantly if you hire Latino executives that can actually bring you to amazing content that is authentic and that is successful. 4th, join our LDC advisory network. We are a group of people that do this out of selfless interest of helping everybody, every American, Latino and non-Latino. And through the advisory network, you're privy to conversations, data, previews, and premieres of data that, that will empower everything you do. Number 2, if you're an advertiser, use your media buy. Advertise on shows that portray Latinos and Latino stories. Why? Because if you have a strategy in your company, you create advertising that appeals to Latinos, but you advertise in shows that Latinos are not watching, your strategy is not going to work. You need to use your power of media buy to place and to demand actually networks to actually create shows that deliver the audience. There's no way out of it. You need distribution, and your distribution has to do with the shows that you're buying in. Number 2, include Latinos in your ads. Why? Because we Latinos in the audience know what it is to see an advertising that talks about Latinos other than the typical stereotypes, right? Latinos in middle class, Latino college grads, Latino students, Latinos that have been here for, 300 years, Latinos that are indigenous, so many Latinos that are never represented. Include those Latinos in your ads. They are Americans. They are all in all spectrum of society, and they're beautiful, quite frankly. And 3rd, hire Latino executives, and in the case of advertising agencies, creatives. Don't ever, wasn't that the saddest thing to see poor Biden getting into Miami and, playing Despacito and being booed? That was sad. And the reason why that happened is because whoever was training him, guiding him, managing him, and designing his creative appeal was obviously not a Latino, because a Latino would have never done that. So hire creatives that are Latinos. They will deliver authentic, beautiful, real, fact-based strategies and content that will bring you a lot of growth. And if you are part of the audience and a consumer of entertainment, to the degree that we all are, according to Nielsen, every American in average consumes 6 hours of content every day. It's a lot. I don't know how they do it because I have to work, but I guess it's students. I don't know. But according to Nielsen, this year, people consumed an average of 6 hours of content. So if you are a content consumer, whether you're 6 hours or less or more, first sign up for our LDC newsletter. You'll love it. It's fun. It's great. You'll be privy to a lot of information before it's spread. You will understand what we're doing. You'll know of events. You'll know about presentations, and you'll be part of our family, of the family of the LDC. Number 2, spread the word. Remember the numbers that I gave you. The good ones, the $2.3 trillion, the 86% of all new businesses, the 56% of homes being built, and also the sad ones, the 1.4 representation in media. Because to create a balance, we're going to have to start being vocal about this. So we earn our place. How come we don't have it yet in media? So use those numbers, spread the word, and speak up, not only with your voice, which is extremely important, but with the power of your purse. You buying products that include Latinos in their advertising, in their philanthropy, in their curation, in their procurement, you supporting those products of those companies, you're using the power of your purse. And you also use it, and please use it, by not buying products that you know are not supporting the community, are not portraying us in their content, whether it's advertising and shows or films. And look out for owners of companies that are supporting anti-immigration, anti-Latino, causes, because the power of your purse is tremendous. And when you decide what you buy and you think about who are you supporting with your dollars, your leverage will grow tremendously. So this is it for me. As you know, it is critical that the business and political leaders in this country understand the power of the Latino community in the US economy. There's so much to read. There are so many numbers that you can use. Please go to our website. First of all, thank you so much, but also go use our social media, go to our website, download it, spread the word. And with that, I want to thank you so much for having me, for listening to me. I want to thank Claudia again for doing what she always does so well, which is spreading the word and uniting us. And enjoy the rest of the conference, which is fascinating. And see you soon.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. We're very excited to talk about some of the work we've been doing around understanding differences and commonalities within the U.S. Hispanic community. So we'll talk about this a little bit at a broad level, and then we're really going to dive into a couple of use cases to kind of show you how this comes to life. By way of introduction, my name is Ellen Houston, and I'm Managing Director at CIVIS Analytics. We're a data science, software, and consulting firm founded by Dan Wagner, who is the Chief Analytics Officer for Obama's 2012 re-election campaign. So we really take a lot of the learnings about combining survey data, big data, and really understanding people's attitudes, motivations, and perceptions from politics and bringing those to commercial clients. So we're really excited to talk a little more about that. When We Are All Human approached us about the idea of leveraging big data and new qualitative techniques to really understand this idea of Hispanic belonging, we were really excited because we see so much potential in this idea of merging not only what, but why. And so really what we're going to talk about is how we understand some of those things, both the what and why, using, quote unquote, big data, as well as survey data and more person level insights. So before I keep going, I want to talk a little bit about the problem we're solving, and acknowledge that it's a really complex problem. We're talking about a population over 60 million Hispanics. We have numerous countries of origin that all come with their unique challenges, cultures, sources of pride. And we're really thinking about segmenting multi-layered facets of an individual. What is your community? What is your geography like? What are your political affiliations? What are your perceptions? And, how is your life changing? We've seen recently some of the most dramatic impact and disparate impact from COVID-19. So really, these things aren't a static moment in time thing, but it's something that you need to be thinking about and refreshing and continuing to understand over time. So what are we doing? We're building what we're calling the Human Impact Database. This is really combining a lot of things. It's an N of about 38 million US Hispanics. We're segmenting things nationally on things like what are common barriers? Is it education? Is it employment? Is it food security? We're looking more about what are some of the most common barriers people do and don't face? What is the strength of tie to the community? Are people having advocacy behaviors? Are you volunteering? Are you donating? Are you just being a good neighbor? And then, there's always standard demographics. What are some of the generational things? What are language preference? Items like that. And what we really build is at an individual level, you start to understand over 100 characteristics about a single person. We're making sure that we're CCPA and HIPAA compliant. But really what that does is when you have that much information at a much more granular level, you now have a newly powerful and flexible asset to answer questions about a moment in time, about a singular campaign, and really cut things more granularly than you might be able to do with some traditional segmentation methods. So what does this really look like? Well, first, let's look at an idea around Hispanic identity. How did we get here? First, we fielded a survey that kind of asked attitudes and beliefs and strength of identity with the Hispanic community. We then took that survey, combined it with other data, and completed a model to model that up from an N of about 4,000 to an N of about 38 million. So you start to see a national representation of these attitudes and beliefs. What you're looking at the map, you see all these circles. The color of the circle represents the strength of the identity, orange being weaker, blue being stronger. And the size of the circle represents the size of the population. So at the national level, you start to see some insights already. You start to see geographic concentrations. For example, we see a stronger identity in the Southwest of the United States. But that doesn't really tell the whole story. So when we zoom more into, let's say, a regional level, maybe historically you would think about reaching out in a campaign or reaching out in a message, and you would say, well, we'll do Chicago and LA and New York and Miami. And, that might be a good start. But really, even within those geographies or DMAs or cities, there are going to be unique factors that influence people within different Hispanic communities. So when we look at Chicago, for example, we start to see differences even geographically, say in the middle of the city center versus along the lakefront. But we can even go one layer deeper. When we start to look at the zip code level, we can even see the drivers of commonality and difference even down to the neighborhood level. So when you think about outreach for advocacy, when you think about who is facing what barriers, there's differences down to the neighborhood level, thinking about access to education, crime rates, general population, identity. So even in Chicago, for example, we see, a higher identity in maybe the Southwest sides and, less identity or less strong identity along the lakefront, where we have, higher concentration of high rises and different forms of housing and different income levels. So you start to see that there's nuance beyond just the city level, even down to your neighborhood or zip. And what does that really come down to? Well, over time, you can start to combine some of these more micro views with some of the more macro views. And you can start to say, what patterns are emerging? Do I see patterns of movement across the US? Do I see generational differences? Do I see major trends that I should be thinking about as different parts of the US economy are going stronger or weaker? We're just at the beginning phases of understanding some of this, but there's a huge amount of potential to say, are people moving? Are people staying? Are there differences in demographics within a city emerging? And you can start to see some of that change over time. Another example of how we think about this is not just in perceptions or beliefs, but you can also start to model some behaviors. So what we looked at here, for example, is the likelihood to support a Hispanic-owned business. We took a similar approach. We fielded this in a survey, and then we modeled that up to the entire country. So that's about 38 million Hispanics. But what you start to see again are some of these differences. And when you start to take, what do I think and feel, and what are the perceptions and the realities of the world around me, and then what are some of the behaviors? When you think about outreach, when you think about marketing, when you think about campaign targeting, you can start to combine some of these things together and really have a more holistic understanding of a person and better axes to think about intervention. But what comes next? Once you have all of this insight, you have a really great understanding more at the person level, but how do you really use that to drive change? Well, that's really when it comes to thinking about activating some of this data. So you've got this new level of insight about motivations, ambitions, behaviors. You can think about that for enriching how you do audience planning for programmatic media. You can think about different layers of emotional resonance when you're thinking about campaign and messaging creation. You can even get down to, identifying different areas or people within communities where a different type of message is really going to resonate. Really focus on targeted growth strategies, whether you're thinking about finding new partners for advocacy, whether you're thinking about finding new consumers, whether you're thinking about driving growth for the business. You now have better insight on how you can think about activating against those ideas. And then support for programs in neighborhoods where they're needed. This idea, we only walk through 2 simple examples today, but this becomes immensely interesting when you start to think about combining this with even other geographically available data sources. So when you think about combining this with USDA data to understand the likelihood of access to a supermarket, so you can really focus on food insecurity. When you think about combining this with other demographically or publicly available data sources to understand crime rates, graduation rates, education opportunity, you have a whole new lens now to understand where are there underserved populations, where are there areas most in need, and how do I best reach them? And then you can also just think about, once you've narrowed in on what it is you're trying to solve and how you can measure that, you can have a much more robust metrics and measurement system set up to evaluate the successfulness of your campaigns or your programs. So really what this comes down to is stepping away from just a top-down demographic definition of someone and really understanding the differences and commonalities to move beyond stereotypes and biases and really understand people at a more profound human level. So as we said, we're very excited about the potential of the Human Impact Database. We're just getting started, but we're definitely open to working with some more folks and exploring the opportunities here. So if you have any questions or would like to learn more, please reach out to We Are All Human.